The cowboy saved her from a ruthless gang and discovered they shared the same enemy. Lucas Dust O'Connor had always lived by his own rules. A cowboy with no ties to anyone or anything, he roamed the wild lands of Terra 9, a planet once bustling with life, now reduced to a barren wasteland. The mining towns had collapsed, and the outlaws ruled the land. Lucas preferred it that way. He didn't have to answer to anyone. His only company was his thoughts, the wind in his face, and the endless dust that swirled around him. That evening the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the canyon as Lucas rode toward the edge of Ravager's Canyon. The wind howled as it swept through the craggy rocks, and the distant sound of gunfire reached his ears. Lucas slowed his horse, instinctively reaching for the rifle slung across his back. It wasn't the first time he had heard trouble on Terra. 9, and it wouldn't be the last. He crept forward, the moonlight reflecting off the barrel of his rifle as he scanned the horizon. There, amidst the rocks, a group of rough-looking men surrounded a single woman. The woman was kneeling, her hands bound in front of her. Her captors were laughing, their voices echoing off the canyon walls. Lucas wasn't the type to jump into trouble without a reason, but there was something about the woman that made him stop. Maybe it was the desperation in her eyes, or the way she held herself, defiant even in her helpless state. He didn't think twice. With the speed and precision that only years of experience could give him, Lucas raised his rifle and took down the first 2 men with a single shot each. The remaining outlaws scrambled to draw their weapons, but they were too slow. Lucas was already moving, rolling to the side and firing again. 2 more fell. The leader of the group, a burly man with a scarred face and a cruel smile, stood his ground. He wasn't running. Instead, he pointed his gun at the woman. "You think you can save her?" he sneered. "You'll pay for that mistake." Lucas didn't flinch. He fired, hitting the man square in the chest. The leader dropped to the ground without a sound. The woman, now freed from her captors, scrambled to her feet. She was tall, with long dark hair that framed a sharp, determined face. She looked at Lucas, her expression unreadable. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice hoarse. Lucas nodded but didn't say anything. He didn't have time for pleasantries. He turned to leave, but the woman stepped in front of him. "You're leaving?" she asked, almost surprised. "I don't do company," Lucas replied bluntly. He had saved her life, but that didn't mean he needed to get involved. She studied him for a long moment before speaking again. "My name's Lyra, and I need your help." "Help? You just survived that gang. What kind of help do you need from me?" Lyra's eyes hardened. They weren't the only ones after me. "I'm not safe here. I'm being hunted." Lucas stared at her, sizing her up. He had no intention of sticking around for any more trouble, but there was something about her, something that tugged at his curiosity. "I'm not a hero," Lucas muttered, but he didn't move. "I'm not asking you to be," Lyra said. She stepped closer, her voice lower now, filled with urgency. "But I'm not asking for charity. I have my own reasons for being out here. And I'm certain we have a common enemy. If you want to survive this world, you'll need to know who's after me." Lucas hesitated. There was something in her eyes, something that told him she wasn't just another damsel in distress. He could see it now, the same hardness that had kept him alive in this brutal world. She wasn't just looking for help. She was looking for someone who could understand her fight. He sighed. "Fine," Lucas said, his voice low and steady. "I'll hear you out. But after that, we part ways." Agreed. The 2 of them started walking toward the nearest settlement, the sound of their footsteps muted by the vast emptiness of the desert. Lucas kept his distance, but he couldn't help the nagging feeling that this was only the beginning. As they walked, Lyra finally spoke again, breaking the silence. "My father's the one who sent them after me." Lucas didn't look at her, but he could hear the bitterness in her voice. "Your father?" "You may have heard of him. He's the leader of the Red Vultures, a ruthless gang of outlaws who control half of Terra, was 9 and more." Lucas didn't speak for a moment, processing her words. Rafe Valen. The name wasn't unfamiliar. Valen's gang had been a menace on Terra, 9 for years, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Lucas had crossed paths with them before, though he preferred to avoid conflict when he could. "Why'd you leave?" Lucas asked, his voice steady. "I didn't want to be a part of it anymore," Lyra said. "I thought I could escape." "But he's too powerful. He's sending people after me, trying to drag me back." Lucas stopped walking, "And why should I care about your fight with him?" "Because," Lyra replied, her tone sharp. He's after you too now. Lucas stared at her. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. The words hung in the air between them, almost impossible to believe. Lucas was used to fighting his own battles. He didn't need anyone else, especially not some stranger with a past tangled up with a gang like the Red Vultures. But now Lyra was telling him that this fight had come to his doorstep. How do you figure that? Lucas asked, his voice hard. Lyra's gaze didn't falter. You saved me from them. That means you've crossed them. They won't let that. Lucas didn't respond right away. He rubbed his chin, considering her words. It made sense. The Red Vultures weren't the kind of people to let a slight slide, and Lucas had made a lot of enemies over the years. But what was the connection between him and Lyra? Why would her father's gang care about him? Your father's not going to stop until you're dead, is that it? Lucas asked, his voice now colder. Lyra gave a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. You're getting the picture. Lucas fell silent, mulling over what she'd said. This wasn't just a random rescue. This was bigger than that. He had no intention of getting caught in anyone's war, especially not one involving the Red Vultures. They were the kind of people who would do anything to keep their power, and Lucas had no doubt they'd come after him sooner or later. So, what do you want from me? Lucas asked, his voice flat. Lyra stopped walking and turned to face him. Help me get out of here. Help me find my way off Terra. 9 before they destroy everything I've worked for. Lucas looked her over, his sharp eyes scanning her face for any sign of deception. He didn't trust easily, but something told him she was telling the truth. And after that? Lucas asked. We part ways. I keep moving, you keep doing whatever it is you do. Lucas could see it in her eyes. There was no ulterior motive. She wasn't asking for charity. She was offering a deal, a way out for both of them. After a long pause, Lucas nodded. All right, we'll stick together for now. But after that, we're done. I don't blame you. Lucas didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. He could already feel the weight of the coming storm, and it was only a matter of time before it found them. As they continued on their journey, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much larger than either of them could have imagined. Lucas and Lyra had barely caught their breath after the fight with the Red Vultures when they realized the true scale of the problem. The gang wasn't just a bunch of outlaws causing chaos for the fun of it. They were organized, well-funded, and led by someone who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. Lucas had known there were dangers on Terra, 9, but he had no idea the storm that was coming for both of them. As they made their way through the harsh desert landscape, the sun high in the sky, Lucas thought about the promise he made to Lyra. She had told him that Rafe Valen, her father, was at the heart of the mess. Lucas didn't know much about the Red Vultures other than the stories. The gang had a reputation for brutality, and Rafe Valen was no different. A man with no morals, only a hunger for power. The sooner we get to his base, the better, Lyra said quietly, her voice filled with determination. Lucas didn't say anything. He wasn't one for speeches, but he knew she was right. The longer they stayed in the open, the more they risked being found. He had to admit, even though he didn't trust her completely, there was something about her past that felt real. She wasn't just running from her father. She was running for her life. We're close, Lyra added, glancing up at the jagged rocks in the distance. His fortress is hidden in those mountains. Lucas looked toward the horizon, his eyes narrowing. He'd seen these mountains before. They were treacherous, with sharp cliffs and narrow paths that led into dark tunnels. Not the kind of place a person could just walk into without being noticed. Looks like a fortress, all right, Lucas muttered, but getting in won't be easy. We don't have much of a choice, Lyra replied. He's planning something big, a warship, something that could wipe out entire colonies. The idea of a warship in the hands of Rafe Valen made Lucas uneasy. A weapon like that would change the entire balance of power on Terra. 9. And if Valen was as dangerous as Lyra said, there was no telling how far he'd go to use it. Lucas and Lyra reached the base of the mountains by late afternoon. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows over the rugged terrain. As they climbed, Lucas kept his guard up. The silence of the desert was unnerving, and he felt like they were being watched. He couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was following them. Do you hear that? Lyra asked, her eyes scanning the landscape. Lucas paused and listened, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. A distant rumble echoed across the valley, followed by the faint sound of voices. Lucas turned to Lyra. It's them. Without wasting a second, they ducked behind a large rock formation, peeking out from behind it. A group of Red Vulture's soldiers was moving toward them, their boots kicking up dust as they marched in perfect formation. They were armed and alert, clearly on the hunt. "We can't let them see us," Lucas whispered. "Stay low." They watched as the soldiers passed, their footsteps growing fainter with each step. When the last of them disappeared over the horizon, Lucas let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "That was too close," he said.
Lyra nodded. "We need to keep moving."
"If they know we're here, it won't be long before they send reinforcements." As night fell, they found a small cave to rest in. Lucas stayed on edge, his thoughts racing. There were too many variables in play, too many things that could go wrong. But Lyra had proven herself to be resourceful, and for the first time since he'd met her, Lucas found himself willing to trust her, at least for now. They slept in shifts, each of them alert to any sounds of movement. The desert was cold at night, and Lucas could hear the howling wind outside the cave. It felt like the calm before the storm. By the time the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, Lucas and Lyra were already on the move again. They made their way deeper into the mountains, staying as hidden as possible. The path was treacherous, but Lucas was used to navigating dangerous terrain. It was what he did best. At last they reached the entrance to the fortress. It was a massive stone archway hidden behind a thick curtain of vines and rocks. Lucas had to hand it to Rafe Valen. The man knew how to keep his secrets. But secrets had a way of getting out, and Lucas was determined to find out what the warlord was hiding. They moved quietly, slipping past the guards stationed outside the fortress. As they entered the inner courtyard, Lucas could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. They were about to go up against one of the most dangerous men in the galaxy, and if they weren't careful, they wouldn't make it out alive. Lucas and Lyra moved cautiously through the dark corridors of the fortress, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the silence. The walls were cold and damp, and the flickering lights from the overhead lamps cast long shadows that seemed to follow them. They had no idea how many guards were inside, but Lucas knew they couldn't afford to get caught. "This way," Lyra whispered, leading the way down a narrow hallway. Lucas followed closely behind, his hand on his rifle, his senses on high alert. They reached a large door at the end of the hall. Lyra paused, her hand on the handle, her breath steady. She glanced back at Lucas. "This is it, my father's office. We'll find the warship plans in there." Lucas nodded. He wasn't sure what to expect behind that door, but he knew one thing. Whatever was in there would change everything. Lyra turned the handle, and the door creaked open. Inside, the room was vast and filled with maps and monitors, all tracking various military movements across the galaxy. There, in the center of the room, was a large holographic projection of Terra 9, with a blinking red dot indicating the location of the warship. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes locked on the screen. "This is where he's hiding it. We can't let him launch that ship." Not for any reason. Lucas moved to the control panel and began to study the holographic map. It didn't take long for him to realize that the warship was set to launch in less than 12 hours. "We need to destroy it," Lucas said, his voice low. "And we need to do it now." Just as they were about to make their move, the door slammed open, and Rafe Valen stepped into the room, his cold eyes fixed on his daughter first, then on Lucas. He was a tall man, with dark hair and a commanding presence that made the room feel smaller. "You really thought you could defeat me?" Rafe sneered. "You're nothing but a fool." Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady. "I'm not your daughter anymore. I've come to stop you." Rafe chuckled darkly. "You think you can stop me? You're weak, just like your mother." Lyra's eyes flashed with anger, but Lucas placed a hand on her shoulder. "Not the time," he whispered. Without warning, Lucas pulled out his gun and aimed it at Rafe. The tension in the room was thick, and for a moment, it felt like the world had stopped spinning. The battle was inevitable. No matter how this played out, someone wasn't leaving this room alive. A fierce shootout broke out. The exchange of gunfire was deafening, and chaos filled the room. Lucas ducked behind a column, using it as cover as he fired at the guards rushing in. He could hear Lyra's voice above the noise, her words drowned out by the gunfire, but he could see the determination in her eyes. In the heat of the battle, Lucas spotted a control panel near the far wall. It was the warship's main switch, the only way to stop the launch. Without thinking, Lucas sprinted for it, dodging blasts and leaping over obstacles as the warship's countdown continued. He reached the panel, slamming his hand down on the emergency shutdown button. The lights flickered, the countdown stopped, and the room went silent. Rafe Valen's face twisted with rage. "You think you've won?" "It's over." With a final shot, Lucas took down Wraith Valen. The man collapsed to the ground, his empire crumbling with him. As the dust settled, Lyra stepped forward, her eyes somber. The warship was neutralized, but the cost was high. She had lost everything: her father, her legacy, and her past. "Thank you," she whispered to Lucas, her voice filled with both gratitude and sorrow. Lucas didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. He had come for redemption, but what he found was a world changed forever. They walked out of the fortress together, leaving behind the ruins of the past. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, both of them felt free.